Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Just want to welcome everyone. My name's Candace Hewitt. I'm with Dementia Friendly Tempe. And today we have Pam Ostrowski, and she is the CEO of Alzheimer's Family Consulting. And her presentation today is It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer Journey. I'm going to let Pam introduce herself in more detail when she begins her presentation. And without really any further delays, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Pam.
Thanks so much, Candace. I appreciate it. And thank you all for attending, whether you're here live or whether you're joining us via the recording. If you are here live, you stand a chance of winning a copy which we're doing a raffle for my book, It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey. And I wanted to take a moment to read one review that's on the back of the book, just so you guys get a feel for what's in here, and kind of it gives you a guide of what we'll be talking about today. It says, "My sister and I began this journey with our mother 3 years ago. It lays out precisely the steps and conversations needed to make the journey less painful. I particularly cherish Chapter 7, discussion of emotions, which has been very difficult for me. I learned some valuable tricks and tips. As we continue our journey with mom and Alzheimer's, I will be pulling this book out of my back pocket often." So just, some lucky winners there for the raffle if you stay to the end. So a little bit about me. I won't bore you with too many details, but my life now is focused on helping families, family members of those with both dementia and Alzheimer's, navigate the journey. And basically my mission is to help family members basically go through this journey without regret, without the guilt, without the sense that they're shirking responsibilities by getting their loved one more care, and really allowing you at the end of this journey to be able to look back on it and have peace of mind and calm, and to know that you did the best that you could with the resources that you had for this person that you love so very much. So speaking of the person that I love so very much, this is a picture of my mom. The book is actually based on the 14-year journey of my mom. My dad had dementia the last, I would say 3 or 4 years of his life, and it was related really to vascular issues. Whereas mom's Alzheimer's was actually, she was non-communicative, non-verbal for the last 7 years of her life. As a daughter who used to speak with her mother for 20 to 30 minutes every day, that was devastating to me. And I had 7 years times 365 days of missing that interaction. That being said, I spent a lot of time with mom, visiting her when I could. And so I wanted during that process to have someone who would guide me, who would help me navigate the journey, someone to talk to and say, well, she's doing this, or the care community is doing that. And, is that normal? And understand, when do you learn to let it go? And the concept of, what I have in the book, which is, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And you learn these things throughout the journey, but wouldn't it be nice as a caregiver, as a family member, so you don't have to be the person caring for, specifically physically caring for your loved one, but as a family member, the emotions, the decisions, whether it's financial or medical or personal, are intense. And having someone there to guide you and navigate you on this journey can be extremely helpful. I wish I had had that person, and I would like to be that person for others today. So moving forward, let's talk about this book. What's in there? So what's in the meat of the book? So this is a list of the chapters, and we're going to go through the topics, and I'm going to highlight a couple things that are in the book. But in addition to that, I'm going to fill you in with some of the additional details. So why don't we go ahead and kick off with that? And that way you'll get a feel for both what's in the book, as well as some really helpful tips and guidance across each of these topics. By no means am I going to cover everything that's in the book, but it will give you a flavor for what's there. So the first chapter is actually focused on, is it dementia or is it Alzheimer's? I cannot tell you the number of people who don't know the difference between the two. Now, if you're currently a caregiver or if your loved one has been diagnosed with some sort of dementia, there's over 70 different types. The predominant one, of course, is Alzheimer's. At 60 to 80% of dementia diagnoses are Alzheimer's. So that's the difference. If you're new to this situation, that Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. So in the book, I actually walk through some of the signs that you'll be looking for. And it's important for you to be aware sooner than later. And I know that one of the biggest challenges is that we want to ignore it. You know, you want to say, oh, that's just aging. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem. But one of the things that, and I'm going to read the pieces of the book to you so that you get an idea of what's in here. And by the way, it's in very large print. So you don't need your readers or your contact lenses or your glasses necessarily. It's a benefit, right? But here I mentioned the most common early symptoms of Alzheimer's is difficulty remembering newly learned information, because Alzheimer's changes typically begin in the part of the brain that affects learning. So the symptom that I saw most in my mom was anxiety. And that would have been such an atypical behavior for her. And yet she would get really anxious about the smallest things, like whether a bill was going to be mailed in time. And so she would get upset and say, you know, what if it doesn't make it? And it's like, well, they're not going to shut off the electricity if it arrives a day late. But it was that exaggeration, right? And so I mentioned a bit of the science behind Alzheimer's and dementia in general, but the brain typically shrinks to some degree during healthy aging. But surprisingly, it doesn't lose neurons in large numbers. But in Alzheimer's disease, however, the damage is widespread as many neurons stop functioning and lose connections with other neurons and die. Alzheimer's disrupts processes vital to neurons and their networks, including communication, metabolism, and repair. So when we look at Alzheimer's and the journey that you're going to be on, I remember my dad really, really struggling because he'd been married to my mom since he was 26. He was a World War II veteran. They met during World War II and got married in 1945. So here we are in 2001. So 55 years later, and his wife is younger than him. My mom was 6 years younger, and she's not able to communicate. She's forgetting basic things. She's not cooking anymore. She's got some anxiety about how, you know, things are happening in the household, and, you know, he doesn't know what to do. So, you know, when you're looking at those type of signs, the reason why it's so important to do something about them is that if we let them go, they can be more exacerbated by continuing events. So being able to help your loved one at that early stage is much more important than I think we really realize. And one of the interesting statistics is that women actually get don't get diagnosed with Alzheimer's typically until mid-stage. And that's because we're good at faking our conversations. So we're very polite. We have a go-to 10 to 12 phrases. So if, you know, Jan came up to me and said, oh, hi, Pam, I could respond, oh, hi, how are you today? Right? Because how often have I said that in my lifetime? Well, I'm well. How about you? Oh, I'm doing wonderfully. You know, and so it's that superficial level. And so that's, and when you get to the mid stage of Alzheimer's, you've got to think about the fact that there's the medications, which are really most effective at the early stage, are less effective by mid stage. So the earlier that we pay attention to these signs, the more important it is. One thing that people do talk about a lot is, well, what can I do to stop this from happening? Well, one of the challenges with Alzheimer's is that the changes that happen in the brain that drive the behaviors actually start happening about 20 years in advance. 20 years, that's a 2 and a 0. So these elements here that I'm showing on the slide, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, hormones, supplements, and toxins, are all things that we need to look at in our lives today. So if you're 45 to 65 and you want to keep a healthy brain, making sure that you have a clean food, not eating anything that has a lot of heavy toxins or pesticides, and we'll look at your medications and see what the fillers are in that, supplements, understanding what you need and don't need, hormones, whether you're a man or a woman, you've got fewer of them. So how do we address that? Stress is huge, right? So especially after this last year. Sleep, again, something that people say, oh, I don't need that much sleep. I'll be fine with 4 or 5 hours. I'm a 8.5 to 9 hour girl myself. And that's uninterrupted sleep too, right? Exercise, these are not new topics. However, we need to take them more seriously because we can get a pill for the diabetes. We can get a pill for heart disease or high blood pressure and a pill for cholesterol. You cannot get a pill for your brain. And that is one of the key differences in my mind about the effect of dementia and our lifestyle habits. So keep that in mind as we go through this, because it is something that we can at least make changes in our lifestyle to help at least maybe slow the progression, or maybe even reverse some of the symptoms that we might have as we age. Dementia and Alzheimer's are not a given in your destiny. And if you have a loved one that's related to you specifically, only 5% of the Alzheimer's cases that have been diagnosed actually are seen as genetic. So it's not a genetic disease as much as it is a lifestyle disease. So it gets to join the ranks of many other diseases that are a result of what we're eating and what we're not doing, our sedentary lifestyle. So once you've gotten into a situation where you have a pretty good idea that your loved one has dementia, the book then says, is it time to talk about living arrangements? Now, the thing about this is that the best time to talk about living arrangements is not when you notice the symptoms. It's, I don't know, a year, 5 years, 10 years. My first conversation with my parents about what would happen to them later in life when they were no longer able to take care of themselves happened when I was 16. Think about that. So it was a lot for a 16-year-old to hear, but and of course I didn't want to think about that. But the sooner that you have this conversation, the better. And so in the book, we talk about, when do you have this conversation? And I talk about the fact that it should be, multiple conversations. And one of the biggest things that I hear from my clients as I work with families who have loved ones with dementia and Alzheimer's is that they get stubborn and resistant. And so, I mentioned here, kind of walk you through the emotions that they're feeling. So wondering why your loved one is being so stubborn when it's clear that they need to live in a safer, more helpful environment and more stimulative, right? Staying at home in their house by themselves is not stimulative. And so the progression of whatever kind of dementia they have is most likely, not guaranteed, but most likely going to progress faster because they're isolated. If we haven't learned anything from the pandemic, it's that isolation is so hard on our seniors. So, here I mentioned that, the emotional state, their emotional state. So they're feeling a sense of loss. And it's not just loss of a home and the things around you or around them, but that they're losing themselves. Can you imagine what that would feel like? And if they're losing themselves, there's going to be a lot of fear. Fear comes out as resistance and anger and stubbornness. So when we see those behaviors, we need to think about, well, what are they going through? What does that feel like? So now this journey is not one of logic, by the way. We spend a lot of, I spend a lot of time focused on their reality and how they're feeling. And so a sense of fear, a sense of anger, like, why is this happening to me? For my dad, who was pretty aware of things until probably the last, 3 or 4 years, he actually sat down with me and he was very upset. And I asked him what was going on, and it took a while, but I finally got him to admit, he's like, this is not the way it was supposed to be. She's 6 years younger than I am. I was the one who was supposed to have failing health first. And so we don't, especially as children of those with dementia and Alzheimer's, we don't think about what's going through their minds as a couple. If you're dealing with both parents, if you're only dealing with a single parent, a lot of times, they were planning on their 60s, 70s, 80s of being out, active, playing golf or traveling or, learning new recipes or doing something with their lives. And this horrible disease has managed to grab a hold of them. So we want to be cognizant and caring and loving and give them the dignity, as opposed to being cajoling or pushy, which, you get frustrated. I mean, I'm the first. I hung up on my dad when he would call and complain about things, because he called all the time. It wasn't just a phone call once in a while or once a week. It was like 3 times a day. So he and I worked through that. And I don't have any regrets from doing that. But there's a point where you can break. And that's why I really wrote the book, is that as a daughter, I was very close to both of my parents, and the 3 of us went through this together. And there were some bumpy times, where I really felt pushed to my edge. And so if you talk about these things in advance, which we did, then you can identify criteria. Okay, so here you are, end of, getting in your later years, mom and dad, or spouse. What is it that would be the trigger to determine that we go to the next level of care? So the care continuum we'll talk about in just a second. But how do you know when it's time? So write down some things that, gosh, I wouldn't want to have my loved one toileting me, or I wouldn't want my loved one showering me. Put those things down. Ask them to write that stuff down, because it's important for you as the person who's going to read that information and say, okay, we talked about this last year, and these are these things are starting to happen. So what do we want to do next? And then in the book, I also talk about everything possible, that what you can say. If at the end, I'll provide my contact information, and you can go to my YouTube channel, which is if you go on YouTube and just search for Alzheimer's Family Consulting, you will find all of the videos. And I have an hour-long video about how to have the talk with your loved one when you've got to talk about living arrangements. I mean, you've got to live somewhere, right? So we're not just talking about a senior care community. Where are you going to live? Are you going to live in this home? And if so, how would that work? And you've got to work through those details, and they can get really awkward. And I would say that 100% of the time, I hear the seniors saying, I don't want to be a burden. That's the last thing I want to be, is a burden to my children. So, if that's the way that they feel, how are you going to work around the living arrangements as their care needs increase? Because typically they do. And then we did talk about resistance. So I'm going to stop for a second here and see if there are any questions. Anyone have any questions yet? I'm cheating. I'm looking through my book to find the next section. Okay, then let's go ahead and talk about the care continuum. So what are your care options? So the book walks through in detail all of the different options that you have. One of the things that I find probably most disturbing is when I hear a family member say, well, Dad doesn't want to be put in a home. Well, 40 years ago, we called them homes, and it was only one kind of home, and that was a nursing home. Those exist, but they're skilled nursing homes, and they're typically for the medical community, those with medical issues, more so than they are for people with memory care. So it's important that education for you as a caregiver or family member and education for your loved one are all part of that living arrangements conversation. And that's why the 2 sections are close together, or right next to each other, is there's method to my madness. So, we look at the care options. Now, the first thing that we usually talk about is, well, I'll just have somebody come in to the house. Now, my father did not trust anyone, so that was not an option for us. That was just the way he's like, I do not want a stranger in my home. And I said, okay, well, then the home needs to move. And that's how we ended up at a care community that was progressive. Now, I highly recommend this because as we age, or especially if your loved one has been diagnosed with dementia, or I hate to call it mild cognitive impairment because that's kind of an oxymoron. You either have it or you don't. But when we start to age and we start to have memory issues, then the question is, what kind of care do you want and where do you want to live? So if we talk about the care side of things, you can either bring someone in if your loved one is comfortable with that. Please, please, please make sure that that person, if you do have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's specifically, or dementia, either one, please, please, please ask the care care providers what their certifications and qualifications are for dementia specifically. So if you're just bringing someone in, you're going to stay and work on a puzzle, or work on a new activity, or sort socks, or do something that requires stimulation for the brain with your loved one, and you're just bringing someone in to do housekeeping, cooking, whatever it might be, then that's not such an important requirement. But if you're going to leave your loved one, and you're not going to go to an activity center where they specialize in dementia and Alzheimer's, and you're going to leave that person with your loved one, make sure that they understand how to speak with your loved one, because speaking with someone with dementia is different. The words that you choose, the attitude that you have, the patience that you have, are really critical, and you want to have those qualities if you're going to be leaving your loved one with that in-home care person. Now, if you move to a progressive care, mom, as she was already getting disoriented, and it didn't matter where she was, right? Every time you changed her environment, she just held on to me or my dad and just watched. She was tried to observe and get visual cues. Well, so a progressive environment, we were in one building, 3 floors, and dad was treated as an independent resident and mom was assisted living. She needed help with her medications and, just a couple of things. She didn't really need help with dressing yet, or any of the other more personal hygiene requirements. And then at that point in time, when she did need that, then they moved up a floor, same exact apartment. Mom did not know they moved because the movers came at lunch, took everything, put it right back in the same apartment right above them. And she didn't know that the number changed from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. So, she basically was able to make the transition seamlessly, but get more care. And so that to me was the perfect situation for us. Dad's wasn't a big fan of moving, so he didn't want to deal with the idea of packing up and moving or going to a different care community each time that their needs changed. So he really did like the fact that there was that progressive capability. Having a physician on site might be important to you. Having activities that are focused on learning new things, because that helps with dementia. In promoting brain cell growth and connection. And then the other thing that is important is to make sure that you have criteria for each care community. On my website, it's notthatsimple.com, I do have a guide or a tip sheet, as well as a spreadsheet for you about all the things that you can look for in a care community. And you, of course, can add more of your criteria on the back. But you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples to apples. And that progressive capability might be very important to you, or it might not be important to you at all. It's really individual. This disease and how it affects each individual is unique. Obviously there's some overlay, like for instance, going nonverbal is possible, losing your ability to walk potentially because your brain is no longer telling your legs what to do, swallowing. There's all sorts of things that can happen, but you could put 2 people together with Alzheimer's and they can have entirely different symptoms. Overarching, similar, but when you get down to the details, they're different. And that's really where you want to find out if your care options match with your loved one's needs. So, we again, focus on how do you have that conversation to make sure that everything works out well for your loved one, and that you don't feel any guilt or any regret or remorse about any decisions that you've made. Now, I mentioned earlier that, and then in the next chapter, in chapter 4, I talk about the fact that, Dad was more cognizant than Mom, even though he was much older. And, we really talk about when care plans don't match. These two people are tied at the hip, so to speak, and one of them is doing well and one of them is not. So you've got to look at the situation closely to determine how you want to handle that. Some loved ones, split up, meaning that the spouse is living in the care community and the other spouse is still living in their home, individual residence, and they come to visit. Well, that may work. I know from my father that was not acceptable. He didn't trust people enough to leave Mom with anyone, and so he moved in with her, or they moved in together. And so that's a really important conversation for you to have if you have both parents still alive. What does that look like? So then if you've got these two different care needs, then what type of conversation do you have with the care community? Not all care communities have that progressive capability. I believe more of them do now than they did back when we were looking back in 2007. So I think with the aging of the baby boomers and some of the other events that have happened, we're starting to see more, for lack of a better term, more progressive thought process towards the services that care communities provide. And I think they're only going to get better and more refined as time goes on. So, these are questions you're going to have to think about, what questions you want to ask them. And the book has the types of questions that we asked the care communities. So you have at least a foundation of information that you can use and walk through, so that you have an idea of where your loved one or spouse might go. Now, the other options, so you've got in-home care, you've got independent living, assisted living, memory care, a group home, which is a smaller community, much more intimate, but may or may not be suited for dementia and Alzheimer's. So that's another thing that no matter who you talk with, you really do have to have that detailed conversation about how are the caregivers, educated on dementia, and, observe what's happening. To me, the care community was better because Dad needed more activity. So he and I would play pool, and Mom would watch with my dog, or we would go to the activity center and do something else. But we had we were able to stretch out more in a care community, whereas a group home is literally a home with a dedicated bedroom and bathrooms for each individual. But it's small. It's a home, right? So that's another option. And then skilled nursing, of course, is really, again, a combination. So, for instance, my mom fell. She did not break her hip, but but there was that potential. If she had, then the question would have been, probably have to move to skilled nursing with dementia care at the same time, and, try to find a place for that. And then Dad wouldn't have been able to be with her anyway. So this is the book is called It's Not That Simple for a reason. There's a lot of decisions to make. And so, you want to think about what's in the next chapter, which is, gosh, I need help. So who's on my care team? I hope that you. Yes. Do we have a question?
We got a couple questions here, and I don't want them to kind of build up. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
One
please.
of them, when you were talking about the different types of care that can be provided, one of the questions: how do I convince my mom that she needs memory care, not assisted living?
So the way I would address that is that I would go ahead and let her go into assisted living. Because at this point in time, because trying to convince somebody that they have more severe memory problems than they do. Now, obviously, this is a generic response because it's a generic question. I would need to speak with that, whoever's asked that question in more detail in order to understand, what type of functions is she not able to perform? I mean, the reason why you go into assisted living is at the point where you can no longer complete at least 2 activities of daily learning, ADLs. And, depending on what those are, that can head you in a different direction. But if you've tried the in-home care side of things, the natural progression, even with someone with dementia, is assisted living, but making sure that the care community you choose or the group home that you choose understands that this person, and they'll do their own evaluation, and they will determine whether or not this individual qualifies. And so you can get them to help. You can have services like mine where we sit down and we talk about what words do we use around this conversation, how evaluate and assess the options for your loved one. And but if you can, if you need an immediate decision, I would go ahead and go with assisted living with the help from the care community, physician and nursing staff, and get their read on the situation. And then once your mom is moved, then you can evaluate from that point, because there's going to be a transition period. So it's not really fair to evaluate her in the first 30 to 45 days because it's that shock to the system, so to speak. And at that point in time, evaluate and assess again to determine whether or not she does actually need memory care. It's so individual. It's really hard to answer that question, but that would be my take on it off the cuff.
Okay, thank you. We also had a couple questions about siblings, and I'm not sure if this is going to be addressed as you kind of move into building your care team. So
it's exactly where it happens.
Maybe
go ahead.
After you go through a couple slides, just kind of check in again for these questions, and we'll see.
Oh, go ahead. We'll start with the questions. I'm fine. Okay. I think that would be a great idea.
Perfect. So the first one is, what should you do when your siblings are resistant to planning ahead with your parents?
Oh my gosh. So you're in good company, first of all. And in my situation, my brothers lived back east and I had moved my parents out. As soon as I saw mom's symptoms, I took on the responsibility of moving them out here and knew that I was going to be on my own. So I didn't have that as much as I did have their support. It was via phone. So when you're in that situation, so first of all, I would ask the question of your siblings. So why are you resistant? What's really going on? And it depends on your relationship with them, right? Which brings a whole new level of complexity. So let's say that you're middle of the road relationship, right? You send each other Christmas cards, you see each other at the holidays, and that's it. So, you're in the middle of the road here, and it's like, look, I've observed some behaviors about mom and dad, and I would like to, or mom or dad, and I think it's important we sit down and have a talk about later life planning. Okay, so that's not put them in the home. It's not put them into assisted living. It's using the term later in life or later life planning, because we don't have a plan right now, and I don't want to be scrambling if something happens. And guess what? You don't want to be scrambling either, because it'll cost us all more. And we're going to have to figure all that out. And why not just get it over with now? So that would be my first approach, is to watch your verbiage, because what's typically happens with siblings, like my brothers did not come visit my mom the last 5 years that she was alive. And one of my brothers said to me, I can't see her like this. I can't do that. And I said, I understand, and let's just, at least have you on video, but she couldn't process that. So it was that sense of sadness, grief, dealing with who the person was versus who they are today. It's unique to each individual. I have found that men are more affected with, a mom or a dad failing. And so they tend to pull back and resist more than women. Women are, being caregivers by nature, and at least typically, that we, step in and try to figure out a way to solve a problem. And so in that situation, I would recommend watching your words and talking about, well, we all need to be talking about later in life planning, but let's start with mom and dad first. And if they continue to resist, there's no reason why you can't, as a child, to go and meet with your parents and say, everybody else is busy right now, so why don't we start this conversation? So I would not wait. If you get continued resistance, let them join you later, but the sooner you can start planning. Notice I didn't say moving, I said planning. The better off you're going to be. The better off your loved one is going to be, the better off you're going to be. And, the siblings will eventually follow along, but nothing prevents you from having a nice heart-to-heart conversation. The first conversation, by the way, is not about what you want for them. It's about just, well, what are you guys thinking about? 10 years from now, plan further out, because nobody likes to think about it happening in the next year. 10 years from now, where would you want to live? If you can't take care of the house, if you can't cook anymore, what would be your idea of what you would want? Keep it as, at a high level, and start the conversation there. Again, watch the YouTube video called Having the Talk with Your Loved One. It's on my YouTube channel, Alzheimer's Family Consulting, underneath that, on that page. So that would be my recommendation. What's the next question?
So we've got another one where they're saying that their brother controls the finances and is only concerned about the cheapest options. What should you do?
Well, my first question would be, what kind of shape is your loved one in? Because sometimes you can get the loved one to convince the child, in this case, the individual's brother, to back off. My guess is if he already has control of the finances and is the durable power of attorney who would have control over that, then the individual's already at a place where they couldn't help with that. And so ultimately what I would do is I would meet with the care communities that you like, and meet with the care community that's the cheapest that your brother likes, and have a conversation with them about your concerns. And ultimately, I hate to say it this way, but typically a care community is set up based on pricing for the type of services that they're going to deliver. So they're all pretty commensurate with each other, based on how much do you charge for accompanying someone to the dining room. So dining room food reminders, helping someone with their medications, helping someone with bathing. I mean, as they progress, they're all, and at some point in time, you have the comprehensive people who say, well, we're just going to provide you with the same price for everything. But those tend to stop at assisted living. They're assisted living care communities. And so therefore, if your loved one has memory care needs, they get kicked out. It's like, you know what? You are beyond our level of care. You need to move, which is heartbreaking, right? So again, I would say that, again, I'm not given very many details here, but that would be my general philosophy, is go to the care communities, or let's go together and meet with these individuals and say, okay, we're looking at pricing. And I understand the financial scary thing. That's a big scary thing. As a matter of fact, that was the number one reason why my dad didn't want to move. He said, we already paid off our little condo. We have no expenses virtually. So why would we spend money on having somebody else take care? Why would we pay rent, basically, and have somebody else feed us? We're fine. And that could be your brother's mentality too, is we don't know how long this money is going to last. And as the durable power of attorney, he's probably sitting there going, what if this lasts 10 years? Or what if they live another 15 years? Again, I don't know the details here, but if that's the case, then we won't have enough money. So I appreciate his fiscal conservativeness. But that being said, we also have to balance that with the level of care that your loved one needs. And so and this is the type of thing I do day in and day out, is I talk with brothers and sisters about, okay, well, let's walk through this. Let's get out the whiteboard. And yes, I have whiteboards and easels, and we start doing the math. And it's like, okay, well, they need this, this, and this. And that's the reason I created the community care sheets and put them on the website, is because that way you can compare apples to apples to apples. Whereas, so the cheapest might not be the cheapest, it'll be the lowest price, but with less services. So maybe that's helped a little bit, hopefully. But if you need to chat, I have my contact information at the end.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pam.
You're very welcome. Great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
So we move into the care team, and basically the care team, for me, the description is really broad in that so here I describe it as building your care team is important, as they'll be with you for 4 to 8 years. You'll have medical staff, the care community, management, family members, and maybe a close friend on your care team. Not all of these people have to be on your care team, and not all family members and friends are ready to accept what's happening to your loved one. So keep that in mind. Again, they're going through their own sadness and grief and resistance as well. And it's important to respect where everyone is at on their journey. So, and that sometimes is hard, because they do really struggle with this journey. But one of the, when you talk about the roles of each care team member, it's important to understand everyone's skill sets, and the fact that your care team can and should evolve as time goes on. So we started out with a neurologist for diagnosis, and basically we didn't see him again, because it's like once you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, now it's a matter of, okay, we got to get prepared for this journey. And it has, doctor's visits. She was healthy for the most part. She really didn't have any issues. Mom didn't. And Dad had moderate and severe congestive heart failure, which was what, basically was his final reason for passing. But you have to realize that people will come in and out of your life just as they normally do, right? And they, depending on where they're at, if they're under a lot of stress, work stress or family stress, to ask them to take this on can be difficult. So expect that, or ebb and flow of your care team. And one of the things that I encourage you to do is, I have this section in the care team section, or chapter, that says skills and limits and why you need help from others. And, being able to have somebody who can always accompany your loved one to the doctor is really important. And that person has to be somebody who will take notes, not somebody who's going to listen and not remember, or say, I think the doctor said that, but I don't remember. You want your most reliable person there. Who's going to do grocery shopping, whatever you need, depending on what stage you're at. So if they're still living at home, definitely make sure that someone's monitoring food intake. And that's hard to do. And that is one of the biggest issues. So that was what my trigger point was for Mom and Dad moving, and us saying, okay, time to sell the house. We need to start moving into our care plan to the next stage, because Dad had White Castle burgers, French fries, milk, cereal, and soup. And, he's like, well, these are the staples. I said, Mom needs roughage. There are no vegetables in this house. So, and she was losing weight, and that's a problem, right? And hydration is another huge. I mean, did you know that, just being dehydrated can demonstrate or manifest symptoms of dementia? And my dad never drank water. I mean, he just on occasion, and, I drink 1.5 gallons a day. So it's really important to understand and have the right people with the right desires and skills helping out. And so that's a really important aspect of building your care team. And just for those, just so you know, I mean, we I could talk about this all day long, but we will try to shorten this up. So we should be done in the next 15 minutes. So keep your questions coming, and we'll stay till the end to cover questions as we wrap up. And then don't forget, we do have a raffle for the books. So, and to the person who asked about disagreeing, I have a, a headline that says, disagreeing about care. And then I said, there's a lot of fodder for disagreements around care, as there are so many variables at play, which include money, healthcare, mental well-being, facilities, transportation, clothing, shops, and even dentures, shoes. I said shoes and even and that. So the other thing to keep in mind, and the reason why I highlighted this page, you can see I kind of get enthusiastic about my tabs, but I asked the question, is it better to be right, or is it better to be happy? Do you want your loved one, especially if you're having this conversation with your loved one, but even your siblings, it's like, I know you believe this, but our goal is to give the best care possible to our loved one. So what you're saying is you're okay with giving them a different level of care than they both deserve, earned, and need, so that we can save money. Is that what you're saying? And so, I mean, because you've got to have that type of conversation, but you also have to understand where you're to pick your battles, right? And understand that there's certain things that are worth fighting for because they involve your loved one's well-being. And then there are things that you just need to let go. And that's the hardest thing on the planet to do, by the way, believe me. So that gets us to really the emotional roller coaster, because there's so many different emotions going on, and the more siblings you have, the more emotions there are. And then what I've seen is that people team up, right? So if you had a friend of mine has a sister and two brothers, and she said, oh, well, my sister and I, know that this is what needs to happen with mom, and that needs to happen. And then my brothers are saying something entirely different, and they disagree. And I said, well, let's just stop for a second, because once you build the battlefield, it's going to stay a battlefield until the end. So what if we didn't build a battlefield and we all sat together and put the problem in front of us, not between us? So she has a group of very strong-minded siblings, and they all want to be right. And they all think the other ones are wrong, and they have their reasons. Well, what if we remove right and wrong, and we just hear each other out? And then, psychologically, how the brain works is, you're resisting something for a reason. Very rarely do family members take that deep dive into the responses. That's something that I do in asking, well, why would you think that? And how would you fix the problem if nobody else was in the room? What would be your solution? What is it that you see that we don't see? What are we missing in this story that you believe that we aren't part of? And having that deep dive really helps with this level of emotion. I mean, anger and frustration is always a result of fear, and resistance is also a result of fear. Denial is always going to be there because you don't want to see this person lose who they are and be somebody different to you. That's not what we signed up for, right? Just like my dad said, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. So it's really important that you got to take that deep breath and think, all right, we're all going through this together. We're all in different stages of these emotions. And the reason why I mentioned a roller coaster is because you think about a roller coaster ride's probably 45 seconds. And in that time, your stomach goes up and down like 10 times. So one day, each up and down could be a day. It could be an hour. Excuse me, depending on how many things are going on with your loved one. And it's exhausting and it's arduous. And if your loved one's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, you're in for about 4 to 8 years of this. It could be shorter, but I saw the first signs of it back in 2001, and mom didn't pass until September of 2015. So it's a ride that you have to prepare your mind for, and you need support, and you need someone to help you get through it. Don't do it alone. I did it, I had friends, but I didn't have the support that I now firmly believe is important to this journey. So, so let's say that, you've had the conversations, your loved one is struggling. So to the individual who asked the question about, my loved one thinks they don't need to be in memory care. So these are some scenarios, and the section in Communicating in a Brave New World is one that every person who's related to someone in with dementia or Alzheimer's, or depending on the stage that they're in, it's really important. And I'm sure you've seen some of this advice already, whether you've read it or you've seen it in our in the dementia friendly Tempe presentations or elsewhere. But we really need to focus on living in their world, living where they're at, and communicating by showing them how to do things. So when in doubt, act it out. And when with my mom, I would eat something in front of her so that she would eat. If it was time to lay down, I would do this. If we were at a doctor's office, or when she got her MRI, and I kept my hand on her leg to comfort her. I mean, this is a disease where you must be gentle, kind, and loving, and let them preserve their dignity wherever possible. So, give them a little bit of help, or at least offer to help if they have a complicated task, like putting on a sweater or unfolding a napkin that has silverware in it. We get those at restaurants and at dining rooms and care communities. For someone with memory issues, the concept of where is the silverware? Oh, it's in the napkin. That's like, they're not going to put that together. So if you decide that in some instance, although I don't necessarily recommend it in late stages or maybe even mid stages, if you take them to a family gathering or to a restaurant, which is really noisy and very difficult on them. So I talk about that in the book as well, is, really keep it simple, keep it quiet, and watch over them. There's going to be happy days. There's going to be moments of joy. Those are the things I look for, moments of joy. My mom said my name for the first time in 2 or 3 years, and I grasped onto that, and she never said it again. So, you have those days, and that was both a happy moment and a challenging day, because afterwards I was sitting in the parking lot of the care community crying, because it's like, wow, she said my name. I wonder if she'll ever say it again, So that's the reason why we all need help. We all need to interweave and help each other from the heart, because this is a hard journey. It is, it's not just this, it doesn't take strength per se. It takes knowing that you can be vulnerable. This is a transformative journey for you as a family member or a caregiver, in that you have the opportunity to open your heart to many people, but also to understand that this person who has this disease is in your care, but trusts you, and that being in the moment is more important than any other advice you've ever gotten, because they're in the moment. And if you can make them happy, make them smile, give them, flowers to sniff, any of those basic things that bring them joy, those are the things that they'll remember. Those are the feelings that they'll remember. Emotions are the last thing that we lose. So, Communicating in a Brave New World, you'll learn a lot in that chapter. So then the next chapter is visiting and how to greet and leave. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but always identify yourself. I believe you've heard from Jan Doherty about this. So when you get to eye level with them, when you visit them, I always said, hi, Mom, it's your daughter Pam, or it's Pam. And, everybody was always shocked by how much she would calm down when I would say that to her. But it really is about greeting the person at their level. Don't bring a ton of people in all at once. That's going to be overwhelming for everybody, frankly. And it could be fraught with disappointment, because it's likely that your loved one won't remember at least a few of those people. So if you bring them in one at a time and they spend time with your loved one, then they have a better chance of remembering who they are in their world of life, and they might not. But you have to also prepare those people who visit. So talk with the care community about visiting best practices, because you don't want to be the helicopter child. You don't want to be the one who's there all the time. That's interfering with some of the processes and training and skills that the care community has. So that's another thing, is let the care community do what it is they do best and that they're skilled in. So there's a lot more details on this in the book. And then finally, in the last chapter, we talk about when the end is near. And part of me says that the first bullet should actually be the beginning of the book, but that would be kind of dull and boring. So this is really about, making sure that you have the proper documents in place, including if there's a DNR, do not resuscitate. I hosted a state attorney for a podcast or a webinar, and I did, in my advertising for that, I wrote, you do have an estate plan. Whether you know it or not, you have an estate plan. It's the state's lawyers that are in charge of it. No family members, nobody else. The state, complete strangers, are in charge of your life and what happens to your loved one's assets and their health decisions and everything if you don't have those documents in place. So again, if you go to the YouTube, that webinar is on there as well. Understand what the signs are when the end is near. I saw it immediately. My mom lasted 10 days from the first symptoms that I saw. And she just kind of tuned out. It wasn't anything painful or anything, but the thing that, while I was saying goodbye over that period of time, I kind of reminisced and said, basically, I've done the best I could, and there's no reason for me to feel regret or guilt. I did the best I could. And she had as good a life as she could have. She was always happy. She always had her baby doll. And when she passed during the night, and it was all very peaceful and quiet. And I miss her every single day. So, but I know she's here somewhere watching over me, because, I wrote the book and dedicated it to both of my parents because they were on that journey together. So it was a very touching, moving time, but I kind of prepare you about what to look for. So that what I've just done is kind of giving you an overview along with some stories and perspective on our journey, the guidance and tips that I provide. And I ask you this one question, is that don't you deserve a guide, a navigator, a coach, someone to help you build your specific care strategy and walk you and your loved one, walk with you on this journey? So this is my contact information, Pam at itsnotthatsimple.com. The website is itsnotthatsimple.com. There's a theme here. I don't know if you've noticed yet. However, I'm going to throw a wrench into things, and you can go to my Facebook business page where I post about our webinars and podcasts and additional tips and helpful information. And it's Not That Simple. And actually, that's wrong. It's Dementia now. I just changed it. Sorry, guys. So it's facebook.com. And if you just search for It's Not That Simple, you should be able to find it. And then the YouTube channel, which is searching for, just go for Alzheimer's Family Consulting, and you will find the YouTube channel. So that brings us to the raffle. Drum roll, please. So Candace, what do we have? We have 3 books that I have signed. Who am I sending them to?
Okay, so we've got another question, but
okay, let's do questions first.
Do question first. Okay,
Sure.
We have somebody asking, how do you deal with anger when you remain frustrated with family members who were not supportive of your efforts during the years you provided care?
Oh, so that's in here too, just so you know, there's actually a heading called anger. But the short version, so there's a lot of dynamics that are happening here, and believe me, I get the anger thing, and I had to make some really thoughtful decisions about who was allowed to control my emotions, me or my siblings. And so it was, you can tell I just basically had to take over. And the boys were there, like Dad could talk to my eldest brother because my eldest brother's a really good listener. My other brother was really supportive of whatever Dad was upset about. And he just needed someone to vent to. Mom she was far beyond that need. So with anger, you have to decide, one, who controls your emotions, you or them? What, would you rather be happy or right? So that to me is a really big problem for us as humans, is that, You know, it's like, well, you're wrong and your opinion is this, this, and this. And the more that you get into why they're wrong, the angrier you get. So why would you do that to yourself? So in reality, when we're talking about your loved one's care, and this is why I started the consulting business, is that you have to look at the things that you, what words you choose. Oh my gosh, words really matter. That makes such a difference in how people react to what you're saying. I know you probably think that you're being kind and loving when you have these conversations, but I've heard people say, well, that's what I told him. And it's not the same. So because you're related to this individual, you're in the middle of this, right? So with anger, anger is based in fear, like all the bad emotions, right? So you have to decide, and I shouldn't label them bad, but they're all the aggravating ones. But then you have to get down to the level of detail of what's causing the anger, right? So why are we angry? You know, we're angry because we disagree. Okay, we disagree about what? What is it we disagree about? We disagree about the level of care mom needs. Okay, so we disagree about that. All right, so why don't we list all the things that we each think mom needs? Okay, so everybody makes their list. And then you go across or you check mark and say, okay, I've got this one, I've got that one. Okay, now you should have a finite list of where you don't see eye to eye. So the question is one list better than the other? No, it's just another person's perspective on what needs are there. So the question is, shouldn't the list be combined? So you have overlap, but then you have your 3 and their 2. And now you have a longer list of things that mom needs or doesn't need. And it's not, so you have to decide, are you going to have a collaborative, combined list of what mom's needs are, or are you going to fight over, you can only have 10, she can only have 10 needs, and we're going to fight for which 10 get addressed. And of course, that's not realistic. So it's a matter of, again, approaching it with a kind, loving heart, giving dignity to your loved one, and working through these conversations that can be really volatile. But remember, if you're starting the conversation with them, it's going to be more volatile than if I'm starting them. And I say that because you bring family history with you, both of you do, past resentments, and you pushed me out of the tree when I was 6, right? You know, there's still that stuff going on. And so you have to keep in mind that those emotions from so much history are part of the challenge with sibling communication. And everybody loves mom. There's no question about that. It's just that the perception of needs and the way the words that you choose to describe those, you guys could be saying the exact same thing, but totally different words, and therefore they look like they're at odds with each other. So it's really so I have 2 degrees in technical communications, right? So to me, words are fascinating, and how people use them, and how it's amazing to me how many times I'll say something and maybe somebody says, I don't know what that means, or you mean this, right? So no matter what your background is, people use different words to position how they feel, what they believe in, what their stories are in their head, and what they believe you believe. And that can be even worse, right? I believe you believe this. And it's like, well, that's not true. Oh, yes, it is. You've always done X, Y, and Z. So nobody gives the other person a break. So it's a complex dynamic. It's one of the reasons why the conversation about later life planning needs to happen earlier, so that your loved one can be in the middle. Like my dad, if my brothers and I would have started arguing about something, my dad would have intervened, and my mom would have tapped the table and said, that's enough, kids. She wouldn't have actually said that, but tapping the table was her way of like, knock it off. So that would be just some inklings of approaches you could have. If you want, we can talk about it more one-on-one. Again, it's really hard to answer some of these questions at a generic level. Anything else, Candace?
Nope, that's it. Our winners On the raffle, we
Well,
have
you write 'em down. I'm sorry.
Trisha S.,
Okay.
Ashley J.,
Okay.
Jenny B.
Awesome. Well, congratulations to our winners. So if Candace doesn't have it already, because I've got my PowerPoint up, I can't see it. Please email her or send her your mailing address or your email address, and then I'll reach out to you and get your mailing address to send this to you. Or if you would like to take advantage of a 30-minute complimentary consult and I'll hand you the book, I will need your email address as well. So however you guys want to get your books, just let Candace know. Does that sound reasonable, Candace?
That sounds perfect.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to hand it back to you. Just thank you, everyone, for coming and listening, whether you're here through the recording or live. My heart goes out to you. I say thoughts and prayers to each and every one of you, for each and every one of you every day, because I know what's happening inside your head and your heart. So my best to you. Candace?
Thank you, Pam, for a great presentation.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today's session. Again, I'll be emailing a PDF of Pam's PowerPoint to everyone and a link to the recording, and we'll also be communicating with those 3 winners to arrange the delivery of their books. And that concludes today's presentation. Thank you for coming, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.